Right. And what should be the rationale for becoming an angel investor? Is making money okay to be the grounding
It's
foundation?
probably a very bad reason to become an angel investor because there's a saying that angel investing is a very very expensive hobby, and for the vast because of the power law, for the vast majority of people and for the vast majority of startups you're dealing with, it is going to be a very very expensive hobby. So if you're doing this only for the money, there's probably better ways to make money, and there's probably better ways to make money sooner because you will not see your money for 7 or 10 years in the best case scenario. If you're seeing money in 1 or 2 years, then the startup probably didn't do too well anyway. And so that you need to have innate sense of motivation that is beyond money, about some sense of mission that leads you to do this, that leads you to persist even though there are no exits on the horizon for 7 years, 10 years. Even if you do see a company is doing very very well, you do know that, I mean, over a 7 to 10 year period anything can happen. And so yes, it would be great at that point if when the returns actually do come in, and then you can establish yourself not just as an angel investor but as an investor who's driving returns, raise a fund, stuff like that. And maybe that doesn't take 7 years, maybe that just takes 3 to 5 years, but it's still fairly long term. When you're starting in, you need to have some sort of mission.
Right.
I think the stronger that mission is, the easier it makes everything else.
So there are again two options, right? So if you are really mission oriented, you would rather want to build something of your own, okay, build your own startup, than be an investor in startups. How do you make that choice?
I mean, it depends on what the mission is, right? So if the mission is to solve a very specific problem,
Yeah.
in some cases, yeah, you'd be much better off starting a company. But take Dipali's mission of uh, making sure that female founders get more investment. I mean, that's not really something you can solve with a company. You could solve that with the fund potentially, and maybe angel investing is a path to that. Or now she's a partner at Speed Invest, so that problem sort of takes care of itself. So she's now able to direct more and more funding towards female founders. So it's the angel to VC path that she's done that's helped her with that mission. In my case, my mission is essentially to preach the gospel of network effects, if I had to if I had to put it in sort of a pithy comment. And it's very very hard for me to do that from within a company. If for me to found a company, I would need to not just believe in network effects, I would need to believe in a very specific problem that is solved by network effects, enough that I am willing to give up looking at other sorts of companies and looking at where else network effects could apply. And so far, I've never come across that. So I basically carved this path out for myself because that's what feels closest to the mission that I've created for myself.
Right. So I'll give a rationale that I just had last few days. I mean, you let me know if there is a flaw in this rationale. So I'm passionate, and I feel that if I ever build my own startup, I will give everything. But then I also feel that if I am giving everything to that one startup and knowing that 90% of the startups fail, I would rather diversify and invest in a portfolio of startups than build my own startup, because then I'm only building my own startup, and that is heavily um, that is heavily. I mean, it's not, in all likelihood it would fail, right? Um, I also understand that founders do not start with this intent. Founders start with hope and possibility. But is there a flaw in this rationale that okay, one should be an investor, because if you build your startup, you're just building one startup, and there's no guarantee that you'll succeed.
I mean, I'll give you sort of a generalized saying that I've heard, which I think applies in here, in that diversification is very, very good for wealth preservation. It's not very good for wealth creation. Whereas if you want to create wealth, you need concentration.
Mm,
Uh, and I think that applies to sort of essentially this time. If you're a founder and you're sort of going into your idea, sure, I mean, sure, there's nothing stopping you from going and investing in other startups. But if you see that as a way of diversifying your risk of doing your startup, I think I think being a founder isn't necessarily the right role for that person. You essentially need to be all in mission oriented, like this is it, this is the problem, and essentially eliminate all other options to the point where this becomes your core reason for being. And I think that is a great. I mean, of course, that's not the only thing you need. You need lots of other things to go right before you can build with. But I do think you need that kind of a mindset.